But what's going to happen now? On death, this entity arises, which we call the estate. And if you can imagine then, the estate is going to deal with your affairs just as if you would have dealt with them while you were alive. Now, your estate knows where to put your stuff, hopefully, because you have, at some point during your lifetime, written a will. If you fail to write a will, you're said to die intestate, and now what's going to happen is your property will be distributed according to the laws of the province in which you live. It will likely still go to your heirs and beneficiaries, but probably not in the order or with the speed that you would have hoped would have happened. Now, you might have named a number of people in your will to receive this property. You might have named, for example, a surviving spouse. You might have named some of your children or grandchildren. You might have left some money to a charity, and those are all legitimate uses of the will. You could have used the will to take care of any of those needs, and that would just be fine. What we will find is that as this property flows through this process, most provinces, Quebec being the exception, will impose an additional tax here. We call this additional tax or fee probate. As I said, in Quebec, there is no probate. In Alberta, $400 is the cap of your probate. But if you happen to live in British Columbia, you can find your property probated up to 1.5% of its value, which means you could sacrifice a significant amount in addition to the taxes that you've already paid to Revenue Canada. So we put the property through this process of probate now. Now this leads us to another point, that it's not only Revenue Canada that might have gotten some of your assets as they flowed through this process. Although we are very aware of Revenue Canada, you would find also at this time that any other creditors you might have could have accessed that value. Now, we do have an advantage if we leave property to our surviving spouse. Anything left to the surviving spouse will have the taxes deferred. That is, taxes don't have to be paid at that time. Rather, we benefit from this tax-free spousal rollover. So we do have this advantage of a tax deferral only on property left to our surviving spouse. But it does, of course, leave that property untaxed to this point. When the surviving spouse passes on, at that point, of course, Revenue Canada is going to say, you never paid your taxes on that yet, now it's time to pay those taxes. So we recognize that on death, we'd like to have this property flow through relatively untouched to these folks on the other side of the wall of death. However, that might be a challenge because we do have these taxes to pay. So one of the tools that we can use to help manage this tax burden that will arise on our death, of course,